Welcome to Let's Talk Business Phoenix, where we dive into the topics shaping our community and our economy. I'm your host, Todd Sanders, and today we're excited to introduce a new series, Election Insider, Voices of the Vote. In this series, we're going to explore the pivotal role of elections in our local and national business landscapes, from interviews with key political figures to insights on how voting impacts business policy. Our goal is to provide you with information you need to make informed decisions and understand the broader implications of your vote. Join us as we bring you voices from across the political spectrum, offer behind-the-scenes looks at elections processes, and discuss how the outcomes of these elections could impact the business climate here in the greater Phoenix region.
Let's Talk Business Phoenix was produced in partnership with Ideas Collide, an agency offering a full suite of custom marketing solutions for your brand's unique challenges. Make a connection at ideascollide.com.
Welcome back to the podcast. We are incredibly honored to have Maricopa County Recorder Stephen Richer here with us today to talk about all things elections, but everything else, because he's truly a Renaissance man. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's an honor for me. Actually, what is the preferred nomenclature these days? Because I think in the time that I've been in the Valley, it's changed. So what is the shorthand lingo for the organization now?
Greater Phoenix Chamber.
Greater Phoenix Chamber.
There you go.
Okay.
You got it. You nailed it. But thank you for being here. I know you're busy. You're obviously gearing up for
Tis the
the
season.
small election. But we're gonna, I think everybody probably knows you from something or from the news or newspapers. But let's maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and something that we wouldn't find on a bio or a resume that we would find interesting.
Oh gosh, I'm a major sports enthusiast. I'm a major fantasy book enthusiast. I like writing. Let's try and think. Word puzzles. What else? I like musicals a lot. I in fact, I can sing almost every single Disney song from memorization.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, now that's huge. In our house, that would go a long way.
Yeah, if your girls like The Little Mermaid or something like that, then sign me up.
You're the man.
Yeah. And she was a redhead, so
there is that.
Yeah, that's why I chose that one in particular.
From Arizona?
Not from Arizona.
Okay.
Was born in Utah.
Okay.
Lived in New Orleans, Chicago twice, DC twice, Mexico. Did a stop in New York real quickly, but family moved down to Arizona. Wife and I met in Chicago. She's from Oregon. We knew we wanted to get back to the West eventually. Started visiting here more frequently. Moved to Arizona. Then she moved a few years later, and it's been amazing. And I think we're huge Arizona evangelists, in part because neither of us was born here, but in short time we felt like we were so woven into the Arizona fabric, and it's just an incredibly welcoming place. And I think of a place like Louisiana, where my mom's from, and that's a place where it's sort of like, well, what did your father's father do in Louisiana before you get your real chops here? And Arizona is the exact opposite, and I'm very grateful.
It's a great place to be new.
It's a great place to be new.
Attorney by trade?
Attorney, business person, but attorney. Yep, I was doing law before jumping into this office. I was Steptoe and Johnson, it's a DC-based firm, and then out here I was with Lewis Roca, which is a fantastic firm, which actually just underwent a merger, and so they are getting bigger and becoming an AmLaw 100 firm, and so congratulations to them. And I think Ken Van Winkle is involved with the Greater Phoenix Chamber and does some stuff with you, and so good guy. Both of them great firms, have only positive things to say. And we have an undersized legal community for the size of Phoenix metro area, just because we have fewer Fortune 500 legacy companies that are here, but the legal community is growing, and so I was pleased to see that Lewis Roca is now going to be part of a much bigger operation.
And obviously, like I said, a Renaissance man. Why the law? What drew you into the law?
Yeah, I went to a lot of school. I went to grad school. I went to law school. Dad was a lawyer, and I suppose I fell victim a little bit to what they joke about online, where it's like, if you're a social science major in college and don't quite have your life figured out yet, then go to law school. And so went to University of Chicago, actually again for law school. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, that's on me. Chicago's rigorous place, not the warmest, cuddliest place, but great experience. Met my wife there, and so we'll forever be grateful.
That's right. And we're glad that after all of those cities, you decided that Phoenix was the place you wanted to be.
Yeah, I lived downtown for my first few years here, and then we built a home at the very base of South Mountain, and we love that community, and it's a growing community. It sort of reflects just the fast changing environment that is Phoenix, where it looks completely different than what it looked like 10 years ago.
You bet. Absolutely. Huge changes. So you have your family, an ongoing, good, successful legal career, and you said, hey, why don't I go where the big bucks are and go into public service? What was that all about?
Yeah, I'd been involved in politics my whole life, politics curious. I'd done a stint at American Enterprise Institute and Cato Institute, which are conservatively leaning think tanks in Washington, D.C. So I loved policy. I loved the sort of the competition of ideas. And here in Arizona, I'd been involved in a few Republican campaigns. I worked on, for instance, the 2018 Martha McSally campaign. And I was interested. And at that time, the office was held by my predecessor, Adrian Fontes. And he had been clashing with the Republican Party, and it was still a big thing for the Republican Party to lose a county-wide seat.
It'd been held for a long time.
Yeah, because in 2016, it was still, Maricopa County was a Republican county, and so the county party lost sheriff and county recorder at that point, and I think that was a little bit of a wake-up call, and so county party wanted to take those back. John Lyons was the state party chairman at that time. He and I were close, and so this office was something that combined a bunch of things that I liked, which was management, because you're running an office, the law, and that you're following the law and reading that law and applying it, and then also politics, in that you run for the office and some of the subject matter is inherently political. And I thought it would be a good place to sort of test the waters, and it was a good place, but for maybe different reasons than I originally anticipated.
You caught the car.
Yeah.
And what I think what was interesting for me watching that, it was how you both handled that transition and how you tended, it wasn't an acrimonious type of transition, but I think it was where you worked together to make sure that things were done right.
Yeah, no.
And your obviously credentials are very conservative and Republican, and you had a Democrat there, but you still managed to do it in a way that was interesting for me.
Yeah, and really the credit goes to Adrian primarily on that one, just because I had won that race, and it's harder to be gracious when you lose than when you win. And so credit to Adrian for opening up the office, for making himself available, and for making the transition smooth. And politics works in funny ways, or God works in funny ways, because we weren't best of friends in 2019 or in most of 2020, and we 2 years later, I found myself where I was working pretty frequently with Adrian Fontes, and we get along great now, and he's somebody I consider a friend, and I hope he would say the same about me. And it's nice now because we're both working towards the same ends, and most of it's not political, where we might have different policy prescriptions for different things, and maybe we view the world differently, but for the most part, we're just working together nicely.
Kind of a rarity these days, isn't it?
Maybe so. And that is one of the good things about being in an administrative office rather than a voting office, so to speak, is that most of what administrative offices do isn't political on a daily basis. It's just attending to nuts and bolts and so on, all that stuff. We realize we're on, quote, the same team.
You bet. And I think thinking about when Helen Purcell was in the office, and certainly there for a long time, kind of a little bit sleepy, and they managed the elections, and that was it. Maybe there was a little news blurb. That's changed. So maybe I think for folks who trying to understand sort of the role of the recorder versus, for instance, Secretary of State, talk to us about the role of the recorder,
right,
and why it's become a national story. I mean, you were just on 60 Minutes.
Yeah. So in Arizona, elections are administered at the county level, and we have 15 counties. And in Maricopa County, it is divided between the Board of Supervisors and the recorder. Now, the Board of Supervisors had previously ceded over its election administration responsibilities to the recorder. So when Helen, who's sort of the godfather of elections in Maricopa County, was in office, everything was under the recorder. Then in 2019, the board got involved, and really that sharing of responsibilities is reflected in the other 14 counties. So in all 15 counties, elections are administered by some combination of the Board of Supervisors and the recorder. And in Maricopa County, the way that shakes out is I'm responsible for early voting and for voter registration, and the board's responsible for in-person voting and for tabulation. But we do a lot of stuff together. We work closely together. I have great respect for all 5 of the Board of Supervisors, and it's been a good partnership, but that's ultimately where the authority rests. And that's largely delineated by state statute, but we've shifted a few things. And then the Secretary of State, while he doesn't administer the elections, he plays an important role because he's sort of the chief regulatory authority, and he's responsible for writing what's called the Elections Procedures Manual, which is the roadmap for election officials to follow state statute, because elections are largely driven by state law. And for anyone who's spent time with state law, as you have, it's not always written in the most straightforward, applicable manner.
It's probably because I was writing some of that stuff.
Well, and so the Election Procedures Manual digests that and translate it into a little bit more of an actionable election agenda.
So far, if you're listening to this, you're thinking, all right, that's not the stuff of a 60 Minutes interview. What's changed?
What's changed is that election administration is front and center in the United States, and Arizona factors into that conversation maybe more than any other state in the country. And I think that's largely the result of our changing political dynamic, our battleground nature, the fact that Maricopa County is such a large county. We're the second largest voting jurisdiction in the United States with 4.6 million people and about 2.6 million registered voters, so only behind. And of the 10 largest voting jurisdictions, we're the only one that's very politically competitive. And so I think a lot of eyes are on Maricopa County. And then just given some of the political characters and some of the just history of the last 4 years has made it a front and center issue here in Arizona. And in fact, given that you're a state legislature watcher, I think over the last 3 years, no subject has had more bills introduced regarding the subject than has election administration.
Absolutely. And I think even when you talk to people who are well-versed on elections and feel comfortable with them, there seems to be a lot more questions about our elections. Maybe what are the top 3 misconceptions about the elections?
Especially following the 2020 election, the general election, we had a lot of questions about the tabulation of ballots. And so Arizona does use tabulation equipment. Now, it's important to note that we have 100% paper ballots that are marked by hand, but then we read them through tabulators. And those tabulators are just the same as when you and I took standardized tests when we were in high school. You fill in the oval, and then it's read through the tabulator. And we do that because in Maricopa County, for instance, the average ballot has about 80 contests on it. We have 2 million voters approximately for an election. So that's 160 million ovals that have to be counted and have to be counted quickly and accurately. But we test tabulation equipment.
Okay.
And so a lot of post-2020 stuff was, did the tabulators read the ballots correctly? Did they flip votes? Were they hacked? And so it's important to note that tests are done both before and after, that the political parties do a hand count audit of a statistically significant randomized batches of ballots, so they make sure that the machines read the ballots correctly. The equipment is never connected to the internet. And so just sharing information like that I think prior to 2020 probably wasn't known by more than just a handful of people in terms of how that works. But hopefully hearing some of that gives people some answers to their questions regarding tabulation. Some other stuff, signature verification, sort of mail voting generally, just because it's so big here in Arizona. Lots of mail voting questions. What is ballot harvesting is one that we got a lot, especially when there was a movie called 2,000 Mules that was out. And so, it's moved around a little bit, but those are some of the frequent flyers.
Well, and I think what was interesting about, for instance, the tabulation, I think the Senate contracted with an organization to do a recount, and they actually it turns out they found votes that were more for President Trump. So I expected they thought it would go the other way.
Oh, they said Biden actually received more
Correct.
votes.
Yes.
Yeah. Some later information came out that their hand count wasn't maybe administered in the most professional manner, and so I wouldn't put much stock in that. But we should have confidence in 2020 election because of the post-election tests, because of the hand count audit done by the political parties. So the Republican Party sitting together with the Democratic Party after the 2020 election hand counted 47,000 votes. Hand counted. And then those matched 100% with the machine count. So when I talk about election administration, it's never just trust us because we're nice guys or because we're bipartisan or because we have cameras that you can watch. Trust us because every single thing is tested after the fact or reconciled after the fact, such that you never just say, let's turn on the machines and hope for the best.
Let's hope it all works out.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I hear a lot is, or the question I hear is, well, are they connected to the internet? Is there a way to hack these machines?
So again, one of the reasons why we have paper ballots is not because we just like using paper for the heck of it, although my family's in the mining industry, so you probably can guess where my sympathies lie, which is with industry rather than environmentalism, but we won't get off on that.
We won't go that way.
But the reason why paper is good is because paper, you can't hack paper. And so even if we did accept that machines connected to the internet, or even if we did accept that Russia was trying to hack our systems, we always have an auditable, unhackable paper trail that we can go back to and we can verify afterwards. And so that's what really gives me confidence. But then if you come down to our facility, you'll see that all the tabulation equipment has exposed wiring that just runs to the results server, doesn't run to any external circuit. We produce log files after the election to show that it doesn't connect to any electronic equipment or internet connected equipment. In fact, when we want to produce results, when it's time to share with the public the results of the election, those are downloaded onto a thumb drive, then taken out of the tabulation room and taken to a computer that actually connects to the internet, because in the tabulation center, it's completely walled off from the internet.
Okay, understood. And yet there's still a lot of people that are,
Sure.
And I think, legitimately, some people really still believe that there are issues with the election. How do we move away from that?
I don't know. I think that's the $1 million question, and I haven't figured it out. I will say, to my credit, I've worked really hard on it, and I've tried a lot of different things, but I'm not so naive as to think that everyone's perfectly content now. And I guess what I would just say to your listeners is that if you have a question, we would love to be a resource. And so please contact my office, the recorder's office, and give us a chance. And there's no prejudice in terms of what you may think, or if you see something on the internet that you think looks funky, just give us a chance, because that's really all I can offer. For people who, that's a matter of faith now, and they're not going to change how they think about that, then God bless them. But for people who just need more information, then we want to be a resource to those people.
And I know you've had opportunities for folks to go down and visit the election center and see for themselves how this works and ask questions.
Yes, and we will be reopening tours in December after the canvas period is done, and if that's something that anyone is interested in. And then I've actually seen some aha moments of some of the people that have visited our facility. And if nothing else, that it humanizes the process. You see some of the people involved. You see some of the equipment. You see that it's not just this great black curtain and then, the magician's doing something back there, mixing bottles, and that's how we get the results. And so I've seen some aha moments, and that's very gratifying. But when we talk about doing a lot of those and moving a lot of people through our facility, again, we're in a very blessed county that continues to grow by you probably have the numbers, but 100 people every day move to Maricopa County.
Thankfully, we are in the positive category.
Yeah. Oh, huge testament, and something I celebrate is that people want to move here. And I think nothing speaks to our success so much as the fact that people are voting with their feet, moving their businesses here, moving their families here. But that also means we have 4.6 million people, and no, we haven't brought all of them through our tabulation facility.
Right. Well, let's pivot a little bit. Primaries, give us your sense. It seemed like they went off relatively successfully.
There's always some challenges, but I thought the board did absolutely fantastic with its in-person component. I thought our voter rolls were in better shape than they've ever been in terms of voter list maintenance has been a really high priority for me. Mail voting went off smoothly, and so, it's always try to anticipate as much as you can and then hope for the best and then have contingencies in play. And then, of course, we're now on the eve of the November 5th general election, and it's very possible that the eyes of the entire world will be on Arizona come 8 p.m. Tuesday, November 5th.
Absolutely. So pivoting to the general, what changes, if any, are you looking to make, or what can we expect as we go to the polls on that day?
So the vast majority of Arizonans will probably participate through early ballot in some capacity. Now, for probably about half of people, that will mean sending it back through the USPS. So getting it through USPS and sending it back through USPS. For others, that'll mean getting it through USPS and then dropping it off at a voting location, dropping it off at a drop box, dropping it off at our central facility. And then there will be some people who will vote in person early, and then about 15% of people will vote in person on election day. And all of those
Just 15%?
Just 15%.
Okay.
Yeah. But we'll get a lot of people who will drop off their early ballot on election day. So a lot of people will go to the polls on election day. If recent trends hold, the first results that will be produced at 8 p.m. will probably constitute about 60 to 70% of the total eventual results, and they will skew a little more blue, by which I mean Democratic, than the final results will be. And that's just because in recent years, it's been Democrats who have been especially pushing people to get their early ballots back earlier, and Republicans who have been showing up on election day. And
that's a switch from our history, correct?
That's a switch. And so if you remember, in 2018, Martha McSally, I remember that, and Steve Gaynor, who was running for Secretary of State, were ahead on election night. And then eventually Senator Sinema, our now senator, sort of caught up, so to speak, and Katie Hobbs, our now governor, caught up with Steve Gaynor for Secretary of State.
Correct.
But then if you go to 2020, for instance, I was well behind Adrian with the first results. I'm a Republican.
I think you mentioned
that. But then I won in a landslide victory. And President Trump very nearly caught up with now President Biden in that 2020 election. And so I do think it will mirror that, because that's what 2022 looked like as well. Now, some of the Republican conversation has been changing a little bit. I think Republicans are going to be pushing, again, get your ballot back earlier because they just want to bank votes. But I still think it will conform to that pattern we've seen the last two elections.
So what are your thoughts? We're hearing more and more. Well, obviously, we have a lot of independents here. You're hearing more about no labels. Thoughts on that?
No labels, just support whatever they're trying to do, trying to be part of the civic conversation. It confused a lot of people here in Arizona. No labels obtained political party recognition by submitting the requisite number of signatures at both the county level and the state level. So they were a recognized political party for this year. However, they said, we only exist for the purpose of running a presidential candidate. Then, after talking with a bunch of people, including our Senator Sinema, they said, we're not going to run anyone. So we have some people who registered as no labels. In Maricopa County, we have about 20,000 people.
Okay, so not a small number.
Small as a percentage, but not small as a raw number.
Yeah.
And they did not have anything on their primary ballot. So they just had a blank primary ballot because the no labels party primary had no contested seats because they had no candidates. But they will not have a candidate for the general election either because they declined to run that. But I do think that we're going to see more and more new parties. So the Green Party has obtained recognition again. I know that the Forward Party, which is the Andrew Yang, Christy Todd Whitman project, I think is going to seek recognition in 2025. And, that's just part of this, again, changing political dynamic that does reflect, as you said, that we have approximately 1/3 of our voters in Arizona are party not declared or independent.
Interesting to watch how that's evolved over time.
Yes, and then the other wild card that's on the table is, are we going to change how our elections are done? And that's something that's going to be on the ballot this November.
Prop 140, I believe.
Prop 140, and then there's sort of a companion proposition where you can vote against it, which is going to be confusing for Arizona voters, unfortunately. But what that tries to do is it would move it to our municipal system where all candidates are on the same primary ballot, where it doesn't designate you as a Republican or a Democrat. You're just on the ballot, and every single voter, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, or otherwise, gets the same ballot, and then you vote, and then either the top 2 or top 4 or top 5 advance.
Any thoughts on it?
I think that we are not having a healthy political conversation right now. I think that this potentially could help. I also think of my own experience in South Mountain. I live in a very Democratic district, South Phoenix. And the real vote for who represents me in the state legislature and who represents me in the Congress is in the Democratic primary. Now, I can't vote in the Democratic primary because I'm a registered Republican. But so, for instance, this closely contested race between Yasmin Ansari and Raquel Turan, and that was something that was going to determine the winner, and I wasn't able to participate in that. And I just think that it also reflects a little bit how people are thinking of politics. And so, again, I think that we should be having a healthier political conversation. And while I think that is rooted in something more fundamental that is going on in society, structural changes are one place that you can look.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point. I mean, the political divide seems to be getting wider, and now it's becoming like consumer items, like we talked about, like electric cars versus gas cars, and everything seems to have a label now. Is there a way back? Is this a pendulum? Are we going to keep going this way? What are your thoughts? I mean, you're seeing it firsthand.
I do think there's a level of fatigue, but I'm a Bud Light drinker, and and Bud Light has a great presence here and here, and Hensley is a great company that's their distributor here in Arizona, and I want to drink my Bud Light without necessarily having a conversation about every political topic under the sun. And I would imagine most Americans feel the same way.
Do you think there is some fatigue setting in, and perhaps this is a pendulum that will swing back the other way?
Maybe that's just
wishful thinking,
naive optimism, but political scientists that study this do note a higher level of partisanship right now. And I think it's especially acute here in Arizona just because, again, we're a battleground state. You can't watch a Diamondbacks game without seeing 20 bazillion political advertisements, which will tell you why somebody is simultaneously the best person in the world and the worst person in the world. And so we're primed to be emotional and hostile right now in Arizona. And I don't think that's who we are as just naturally occurring species.
I agree. It's funny, if you just talk to people and get to know them on a personal level, it's hard to just hate them for no reason.
Right. I mean, unless they're Dodgers fans.
Well, that's different. I'm sure Derek would agree with you on that one. So misinformation, another one. I mean, and clearly there are nation states outside of the country that are trying to influence the election. We heard that in D.C. last week that Iran and Russia are very engaged. But certainly it's happening here too. How do we fight that? It seems like a huge task.
So the foreign actors one is outside of my scope of knowledge a bit, but Senator Kelly, our junior senator from the state of Arizona, spoke about that last week, and it's a passion project of his. But this, I think, is the issue of our time, and it's just been made more challenging by the development of social media and how we communicate.
Well, it's almost like you're trying to validate your belief system, and the facts, whatever facts you come across, the ones that seem to validate that are the ones you want to believe. And this is not one political party or another.
No, it is not.
Seems to be pervasive in our culture.
The cognitive studies now show that we human beings are engineered such that we filter information to support our worldviews, to support our tribe, and that was probably some sort of like evolutionarily necessary thing. But now we realize that that's not always the healthiest for a pluralistic community that needs to have differing opinions, but also needs to share some facts.
You bet. So clearly, it's easy to fall into these traps, and you read a certain writer or a certain newspaper that seem to agree with you. How do you fight that personally? I mean, do you read a range of media sources? Do you look for that? Or?
Yeah, I think source still matters, and the quality of the source is still fairly similar to what it was 20 years ago. I think that established news media has fumbled and dropped the ball occasionally, but I still think that the Wall Street Journal, the Arizona Republic, the New York Times, the National Review do a pretty solid job of being real journalists and fact-checking. Again, they have fumbled, and that is part of the reason why we have this crisis. But so I think go to responsible companies, go to responsible publications, go to responsible journalists, and then I would say try to read a breadth of things and try to dig in and then try to identify proxies who have an interest in the truth, because the reality is like most people work during the day, attend to family matters at night, and then hopefully get in a little sports or Netflix at late night, and they don't have time to research all of this. And so I think we do need more trusted voices, and I think it's one of the reasons why I'm proud that ASU's journalism school is named after Cronkite, because I think that was somebody that Arizonans and the rest of the country could say, like, you know what? He might not have gotten it right every single time, but that was somebody who approached it with good faith and tried to get a true factual analysis, and that was an important proxy for us to have.
I had the opportunity to hear Jamie Dimon speak, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase.
Small bank, yeah.
But he talked about this, and one of the things that he talked about was that you're looking at, for instance, columnists or even publications that tend to lean the opposite way that you do, and he actually makes sure that he also consumes that as well, to make sure that it's not just essentially, you're obviously rooted in business, so Wall Street Journal would seem to be where you might feel comfortable, but Washington Post probably wouldn't be along those same ideological lines. But is that something that you try and do? Or
I try to read a lot, just generally. I'm going to guess that I don't consume as much as Mr. Diamond, who's just has to be aware of so many things. But I think generally speaking, like consume your vegetables, consume your proteins. And I think that social media stuff has a place, but let it direct you to vegetables and proteins and not just like the easy clickbait. That's the sugars.
Stay away from the dessert.
Yeah. And if you saw my actual diet, you would be like, really, you're preaching this? But I would say my news diet does have a bunch of vegetables and proteins, and I think that's the way to go.
Absolutely. Well, I want to shift gears for 1 minute, because you did something that I think is, I don't know how well known it is, but I think it's incredibly impactful for people in their everyday lives, and that's the Title Alert system that you developed. I know when I heard about it, we signed up for it, and then you hear stories. So talk a little bit about where that came from and how it works and how people can sign up.
I'm proud of quite a few of the things that we've invented over the last 4 years. In fact, we just launched our new recording side website that I think makes it a lot easier to record documents online and find documents online. Which is great. But this Maricopa Title Alert does relate to recording of documents. And as soon as I took office, I started hearing more people concerned about deed fraud, title fraud. I own a vacant piece of property, and I don't go there very often, and all of a sudden I found that somebody fraudulently conveyed it away to an unsuspecting buyer, and then that buyer sold it to somebody else. And then when I visited it a year later, I found out that like somebody's stuff had been moved in. And so what do I do about that? And there were some private companies that offered title, either insurance or title monitoring services, but we wanted to provide something that was free of charge that everyone could use. So what we created was Maricopa Title Alert. It's just titlealert.maricopa.gov. And what you can do is you can go onto our website and you can enter your name, the name of a trust, the name of an LLC, whatever you hold title to property in, you enter it into the box. And then any time that a document is recorded and one of those names is indexed, then we automatically email you or text you a link to the document. And what this does is it allows you to immediately take action. And so if you see a document recorded that's improper, then you can immediately contact law enforcement. So just something that hopefully gives people peace of mind and then also allows them to take immediate action, because it's much easier to reverse on day one than it is on day 365.
And this does happen where people find out a year later that they're...
It does happen. And especially just given that we have a very fluid real property market here in Arizona, I don't want to scare people and suggest that it's happening every single minute, but it happens. And when it does happen, it's a burden. And so we want to make it less burdensome, and we will also provide that peace of mind. It's in English and Spanish, and it only takes like 2 minutes to fill out.
And unlike most insurance, this is free.
This is free, yes, exactly.
Free's good.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned other things you're proud of as we were kind of wrapping up. What are some of the other things that you're proud of as you look back on your time in office?
Enhanced ballot tracking features, individual voter dashboards. We rebuilt the voter registration system. We built a new election side website in addition to that recording side website. We developed new remote recording kiosk and expanded remote recording such that we're about 91% of documents are now recorded remotely. And then we did a lot on the communications front, because we realized that though it was not what I stepped into office expecting, that communicating about this process was going to be hugely important to the Arizona conversation over these last 4 years. So proud of all that. And then lastly, I'm proud that the team stuck together. A lot of people have been with me for the whole ride, and it's been a heck of a ride, and I'm very grateful for that, but also pretty proud about that.
You should be. It's been a lot of work. What's next?
A new adventure,
yeah.
Which I haven't been able to say this maybe ever in my 39 years, which is just that, like, I can do pretty much whatever the heck I want and with very few limitations. So I am just having fun mulling ideas in my mind. I've obviously got the bug, but it's going to need to take a different form moving forward. So if you ask me in about a month, I think I'll probably have a plan. But for the next 3 weeks, it will be keep my head above water for this little thing called our election.
Small event coming up.
But I have a diverse set of interests, and I'm excited to pursue maybe just something different, and it'll be fun. Unless the Diamondbacks say they need a balding 39-year-old pitcher who can still throw it probably about 70 miles per hour. If there's a need for that in the bullpen, then I accept.
Well, I'm sure Derek would be very interested to hear that. And I do hope that you stay in Arizona.
Oh, absolutely. Arizona's, like I said, it's been amazing to us. My family has a heavy machinery business here in Arizona. My wife her professional career has been fantastic here in Arizona, and our friends are here, and this is where we love it. And I again, I'll not to rag on Louisiana and New Orleans, but New Orleans is a city where when you ask about the glory days, they'll say, like when New Orleans was one of the crown jewels of the United States in the 19th century.
Yeah.
And I think that Arizona is still a teenager that's sort of figuring out what it is, still growing. And I think that it's going to be fun to see what Arizona is 10 years from now, because I think we're going to be more of an economic powerhouse. We're going to start flexing our cultural muscles too. And I just think that our best days in Arizona are still ahead of us if we figure out just a few things. And quite frankly, you have a better finger on the pulse on those things as far as like how to make sure we have water capacity, how to make sure we have road capacity, how to make sure we continue to make it an affordable place, how to make sure we keep it a good business climate. But if we can figure those things out, then I think that we're going to become sort of the next Texas where but hopefully cooler than Texas.
Yeah,
a better
of
Texas
course, yeah.
with less weird stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
We sent them Glen Hammer,
Yeah,
so
I know.
we're good.
Yeah.
I can't think of a better way to end this. Thank you for coming, for your leadership, for everything you've done for our state, and we'll continue to do. We're going to do a quick lightning round with you.
Okay.
Since we are talking everything elections, what was your first election that you voted in?
First, 2004.
That was the first one you voted in?
That was the first election
Presidential?
that I was in. Yeah, exactly. So,
Okay. Was it momentous?
I remember, it was because I just turned 18 and the Iraq War was happening, which was a big thing for 18-year-old. I was on college campus, and so that was a topic of discussion. That was when gay marriage was a really hot topic, and so that felt like a significant election. It's funny how politics works, sort of like what George W. Bush and Dick Cheney represented then versus what they represented now. And it's another one where I'm like, if I would have told myself then, like how this has changed. And so, so that was my first election.
Okay, awesome. First job. What was your first job?
First job was probably working landscaping and then working on a baseball field during the summer. But then also my first 40-hour-a-week job was during the summers of high school. I was a C++ programmer, and it's where I became a Diet Coke addict because I was just going through and reviewing lines of code, and it was so mind-numbingly boring that the only respite I had was to go up and refill my Diet Coke every 15 minutes, and so that's when I became completely addicted to Diet Coke.
There's a lot to unpack there. Yeah. What'd you learn besides the fact that you like Diet Coke?
That I didn't want to be a computer programmer for the rest of my life. I'm sure there are many wonderful and much more interesting computer programming jobs. This was not one of them.
Well, it takes a special brand of person that can do that well. First concert.
First concert would have been Dr. Dre in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Excellent. All right.
Like the Chronic time.
Okay.
So, some of the lyrics are a bit profane, but if you want to find me outside of the very sanitary halls of the Chambers podcast, then I'm happy to drop some of those on you.
All right, awesome. And my staff wanted me to ask you what's been your favorite concert?
It ranges. Favorite concert. I remember having a really great time at a Juvenile concert in 2004. We now go to all of the Taylor Swift concerts and she keeps kicking them off here in Arizona.
Yes, we're lucky.
Which we love that. A concert that I got really pissed that I missed recently was when Blink 182 was here. That was just like, oh my gosh, that was the anthem for a little while. But still. I remember going to a Nelly concert was a really good one.
You've got a good repertoire.
Yeah, but the thing I don't do is I don't do the Coachellas.
Oh yeah, the festivals.
Or the Burning Mans because I'm a ginger and I'm allergic to too much stuff and I get burnt and I can't be outside for that long. And the country music one that we have here in Arizona.
Country Thunder, yeah.
It's in the middle of just this dirt field. I'm I don't think I could survive for more than 6 hours out there. So
you might be a closet Swiftie then.
Not closet.
You just love you're a Swiftie.
Full on. Well, yeah, we are a Swiftie household. Can sing Taylor Swift songs too.
All right.
Yeah.
So Taylor Swift and
you're on the phone with your girlfriend. She's upset. She's going off about something that you said because she doesn't get your humor like I do.
I mean, on that bombshell. I mean, I think we're going to end it here. It doesn't get any better. You got
Taylor
that.
Swift.
Yeah, well, you got that, and then of course your backup job pitching for the Diamondbacks. So perfect. Well, thank you again. We appreciate you having you here.
For the record,
Yes.
Taylor Swift would not be my walkout song for the
Oh, what would it
Diamondbacks.
be?
Yeah, I think
So Derek will know when you get up there.
like Kanye's "All of the Lights." If you can still say Kanye, I'm Jewish, so I think I can say Kanye still. But something a little more hardcore like.
Well, I mean, we're gonna have to have like a music episode after the election.
Well, I really appreciate it, and I appreciate all you guys do. And to any of your listeners who have questions this election season, please reach out to us and say you're a friend of Todd's.
You bet. Well, thank you. We appreciate it. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching this episode of Let's Talk Business Phoenix. Please take a moment to tap the follow or subscribe button for more great podcast episodes to help your business thrive.